in this journey that we're on, the journey is going to have turns, curves, stops, even retreats. So you have to change with the times, but having that self-awareness, personal self-awareness, and the ability to be able to step into your vulnerability allows you to be able to cling to those principles, whatever your principles are.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, creators, and disruptors who are changing the way that business happens today. My name is Tyler Kelly. I'm here with my co-host Leanne Buchanan. And tonight we're coming to you from the Slam Agency St. Louis headquarters. And we're super happy because we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Jayson Wells.
How you doing? Glad to be
Doing well.
here.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Jayson, we know each other pretty well, so I'm super excited to have you on the show. You spent 13 years as a professional basketball player, and now you are an enhancement coach, and we'll dive into what that means. But instead of talking about your career first, I know one of your mottos is it's all about the why. So talk to us a little bit about who you are and why is really important to you.
That's a great question. So that slogan actually started with the spelling of my name, and it only came about in the last 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. I've been in St. Louis for a little over 3 years. So yeah, right about that time. And when I was younger, I was just a guy that hated to have his name misspelled. And, you know, it's typical Jason. I'm Jayson. And I remember the time so specifically because I moved here September of 16, and it was before my 40th birthday, which was December of 16. And I called my mom and I told her, I said, thank you. Thank you for whatever inspired you to putting that Y in my name, because it's given total validation to who I am, what I believe, why I believe I'm here. So I refer to myself as a person of purpose. I am driven by my own journey of purpose and do my best to guide those that are intrigued and interested and ready to go on their own personal journeys of purpose. So that's where it came from.
I love it. You know, this quote is pretty famous. You know, the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit more about where that journey to purpose came from for you, because, you know, getting to purpose is amazing.
Sure.
But it's not something that just kind of falls out of the sky and you know. So talk to us a little bit about how you were able to uncover your purpose.
Mine fell out of the sky.
Or you're the anomaly.
I remember it very vividly. I was living in Atlanta. I actually lived in Atlanta before I came here to St. Louis. In Atlanta, August of 2015, and those times and dates are they have their own relevance to them. But August 2015, I was cleaning my condo just as I normally would. And, you know, YouTube will have like the algorithms of what you listen to and what they play next. And Simon Sinek's TED Talk came on, Start With Why. And I was listening, not even, you know, secondary listening and not even really paying a close attention to it, but it struck me. And probably for the next 6 to 8 months, maybe even a year, I just dove into Simon. I listened to every podcast he was on. I listened to every interview he did. I just started really listening to what he was talking about as far as why and purpose and all of that. And yeah, through all of that, I started to kind of just mold and put together my past experiences, the things that I've been through, you know, verbiage, athletically, non-athletic, just literally threw everything into a pot. And this journey to purpose, which we can talk about, I created an acronym, and I like to say that it was divinely given to me because I'm not that smart. But the acronym to purpose is passion, uncommon, resilience, preparation, opportunity, service, and experience. And those 7 things, you know, I feel like those are the anchor to self-reflection. Those aren't the end-all be-all 7 questions, but most people struggle answering those 7 questions. What are you passionate about? What makes you uncommon? So on and so forth. And just going down this path of self-discovery, self-reflection, self-awareness, that is what ultimately leads you to purpose, I believe. So that's kind of how it all started.
So now we have to ask you.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you're passionate about purpose.
Sure.
And it sounds like you're passionate about bringing that purpose or making that known in other people. Tell me about how you're helping people find their purpose.
Yeah, so my why verbalized is to develop extraordinary winners so they can go inspire and empower the world. And so develop extraordinary winners is a twist. So I keep referring to this band. So on the other side of purpose is a phrase, do you. But it's an acronym. So most of us use that phrase, do you. We all use it in some way, shape, or form. But the DEW originally is personal for me. It's my dad's initials. My dad passed away in 2003. And it was literally just me, having some type of little tribute to him. This was right around the time when rubber bands were becoming popular. Lance Armstrong had the Live Strong bands, and it became that. And not until I was in the middle of my professional career, not until after I retired did I come up with the Develop Extraordinary Winners that could be applicable to everybody, because do you, people would ask for them and I would hesitantly give them to them. So that's where it came about. Develop Extraordinary Winners, listening to Simon and Steven Shedletsky, who actually used to do his podcast when they did the Start With Why podcast. I spoke to Steven a couple times on the phone in reaching out to Simon, and he's like, in developing your why statement, it should be an action and an impact. And so I took Develop Extraordinary Winners as the action, and then added on so they can go inspire and empower the world as the impact item. And so everything about that is directly related. If I'm on a basketball court coaching athletes, it's directly applicable. If I'm standing in front of a room of C-suite executives, it's directly applicable. So, yeah.
So as Simon says, your what might change, but your why remains.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So I'm curious about how you've been able to translate your years of professional basketball experience into the work that you do now. So first, talk to us a little bit about that.
Sure.
I mean, people can't see from sitting at the table because you're way taller than I am.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Although I think maybe
a little bit taller than me too.
And then secondly, what are the takeaways that you were able to learn as a professional athlete that apply to your work today?
Absolutely. Phenomenal question. So the professional years especially, but 4 years of college, 4 years of high school, middle school, going back, it's literally, when we talk about that journey, it's everything. It's a culmination of everything. And so, yes, a lot of that was really brought out in my professional years. You have the maturity, you have the experience to be able to understand certain things, but it's really a culmination of everything. And the biggest things that I've learned and continue to learn is, most people are attracted to sports in some way, shape, or form, whether they played it or not, whether they're interested in my specific sport or not. They're attracted, and sports is what brings us through tough times, which is kind of the down part about even this time that we're in now, is we don't have sports to kind of get us through this. But some of the big things that I've learned: teamwork, responsibility, work ethic, attitude, leadership, both ends, how to lead and how to be led, respect, honesty, truth, accountability, connection, love, all of those things. I call them the principles that don't change. And I could go off on a whole tangent about this, but I feel like that's part of where we're at right now, is we're so caught up into what I refer to as the procedures, how we do things, that we've lost the principles. And much like Simon says, your what may change, but your why won't. I feel like procedures change, but principles don't. Mm-hmm. And so, I just kind of use those things. And the cool part about it is, and you mentioned Enhancement Coach. So my other title, air quotes, is Experience Teller. And we talked before we started recording about I struggle with social labels. So motivational speaker is the social label. I don't want to be called that. Let's call it enhancement coach, or let's call it experience teller, because literally that is all I'm doing is telling my story. And my story happens to be foundationally driven through athletics and through basketball. But there is no more awesome feeling than to have someone who doesn't like basketball, never played basketball, and we get this total connection and energy based off of not the content of the story, but the emotion that it evokes.
So I've always wondered, how big of a gap is there, kind of shifting gears, between the college level and the professional?
I knew you were going there.
You know what I mean? Like,
you couldn't even.
It's night and day, right?
Yeah. Like, so, you know, I tell my young athletes this so much, you know, we live in these times. There's so much access to these guys and ladies, you know, LeBron and Katie and Candace Parker and all these different superstars. But a lot of it comes down to the guys and the girls that you see on the bench that don't play at all. If you were to see them in person, they would be the best basketball player that you've ever seen in your life, hands down. You know, and I'll say that from a very humble standpoint. I'm the best basketball player that you'll ever see until you see somebody that, like, people just, they aren't able to really comprehend when you say 1%, it's really 1%.
Wow.
It's really 1%. Yeah. Big time there, especially college to pro. And it doesn't matter. I never made an NBA team, 13 years all abroad. But basically what you're doing is you have a series of men and women who are this close from making the NBA or the WNBA, and for whatever reason it didn't play out. And now they're over there continuing their dream as a professional player. One of my pet peeves is semi-pro. It's not semi-pro. I play, they pay.
Yeah, there you
That's
go.
where it's professional.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'm curious that you talked a lot about your non-label role as an experience teller. And I think one of the interesting things about being a startup or an entrepreneur is how to connect people with your product or your service so that there's that brand equity that's a little bit more authentic and personal. So what advice do you have for startup founders or marketing officers or people that have to tell stories to create connection?
Yeah.
What have you learned about that, and what advice could you share?
So we were speaking about Kobe before we started recording, and one of the things that it was so cool just watching an interview of him, and he spoke about Joseph Campbell. And Joseph Campbell was this guy really big into mythology, and he was the one that kind of coined what we now refer to as the hero's journey, which Donald Miller has taken and created the story brand book. But listening to that, and studying story, which is pretty much what I do, I found the thing that works best for me is that word that you mentioned, that authenticity. And I believe that authenticity, if you were to have authenticity as an umbrella, I feel like the two legs to authenticity are self-awareness and vulnerability. Mm-hmm. So knowing of myself, taking what I've been through, and then I like to say not referring to it as good or bad. It just is. It just is. And so taking those things, that allows me to get to a place of self-awareness. And then the vulnerability piece is now those same experiences, but being able to share my uncertainties, my fears, my weaknesses, all of those things that we do our best to shun away and not let people in on. I feel like it's the combination of those two things, vulnerability and self-awareness, which lead me to a point where we can be authentic. And again, I speak from my own. I have found that with authenticity, most people are attracted to it, but across the board, people are either attracted to it or appalled by it. Mm-hmm. There's not really an in the middle, you know. And so for me, I do my best to just create an energy where I attract the people, like going back to Simon, I attract the people who believe in what I believe in. Not literally, but believe in growth, believe in enhancement, believe in improvement and getting better and all of those different things. So, yeah.
So you're also an author.
I am an author.
And you've written a
book.
book.
Who am I right now?
I know you're multifaceted. So talk to us a little bit about your journey to becoming an author and what that experience was like and maybe what your book is about.
This is across the board. I never sat down to write a book. I do what I sat down and I call it, I verbally threw up on my keyboard. I just started writing. I started writing all of the things that were in my head. And so the book, which is called The Things We Know But Do Not Do. And people think it's some like cool title. And just to be honest and tell a super quick story, I was watching Jerry Maguire. And if you guys remember Jerry Maguire, when he left the big firm and wrote his dissertation was called The Things We Think and Do Not Say. And I was watching Jerry Maguire and I was like, things we think and do not. You know what? I think we go with the things we know and do not do. So that's literally it. And I've gotten so much positive feedback on the title alone. The title alone caught my attention. And when you think about it, it's exactly that. When people say, when you know better, you do better. I don't believe that because most of us know.
Yeah.
Most of us know what we should and shouldn't be doing, yet we do. Those things that don't necessarily lead us there. So with the book, I sat down and the book is a little bit personal development, and the lady that helped me put it together did a phenomenal job of breaking it down, and it's not chronologically how I wrote it, how it's put together. But the first part of the book is in the personal development space, kind of going that route. And the second part of the book is in that youth athletic space, talking to parents, talking to athletes, talking to teachers and coaches, those people that are in that space. So the book in a nutshell is probably more in the athletic space than it is the business space. But at the end of the day, I can say I'm an author. And the wild part about all of this is this book has been out for about 6 months or so. And I gave myself till April 1st, but in a couple weeks, I'm going to actually start book number 2, which will be called, it's a memoir, and it'll be called The Journey of Purpose. So it'll be the Jayson Wells story. The first book isn't really my story. My experiences, but not my story. The second book will be the story.
Wow. It always amazes me how the way to get there in many fields, athletics is different, but in many aspects of life, the way to get there has already been written. Like it's very clear how to do and how to get to that next level. But for the most part, most people just don't do it.
Absolutely.
Why is that?
You're making me give away the book, Tyler. There's a chapter in the book called Simple versus Easy. And when we hear those terms, most of us start to put those terms into synonyms. And I personally don't believe they're synonyms. I believe they're maybe not antonyms, but they don't mean the same thing, because simple is often very direct, but simple is also often the difficult thing to do. Mm-hmm. And easy is exactly that. And so when it comes down to simple versus easy, most people will shy away from the simple, more difficult thing in favor of the easy thing. And so to answer your question, I feel like in this situation, for most people, it's easier to do something that somebody thinks I should be doing, or what I've always done, or whatever the excuse may be, because following your passion, purpose, pun intended, all of those things, that's what's going to drive me. That's the simple thing to do. But man, that's just seems to be a lot more difficult. I study high performing people, and they all say the same thing. We all say the same thing, whether it's athletics or business or entertainment. We all say the same thing. Those principles that I named earlier, we all say the same thing. We say them in different ways. Some people curse, some people don't. Some people are rah-rah and some people are more mellow, but we're all saying the same thing. So again, people know, but why you make that choice on not acting and not moving forward, that's an individual thing. I just want to ignite. That's another one of my phrases, ignite. I feel like everybody has a pilot light in them, and most of us just need a little ignition. So maybe I can be that spark.
So every single time we have a conversation, you always drop a million great gems that I feel like I need to get my notebook out. Just like, the last conversation we actually had in person, you were recording our conversation.
That's what I do.
Which I love. But, that leads me to the question. You're always dropping great gems like simple versus easy and that whole authenticity model that I'm so going to borrow. But what's the best piece of advice that you've ever been given?
Wow, that's an awesome question. So kind of going back to that principles and procedures thing, I was having a conversation with, I refer to everybody as coach. I read something one time about the word mentor that didn't sit well with me. So I just call everybody coach, whether it's athletically or non-athletically. And so this young man who's 75 years old, so he's at least 75. You've been telling me that for 3 years though. So he's at least 75, could be 78. His name is Jim Burson, and I met him in the basketball world, but he never actually coached me. But he and I were having a conversation a couple years ago, and he said, we were talking about communication, and he said, we used to write letters, or we used to pick up the phone in my day, and now is the new written letter, is it an email, is it a text message? And I was like, Coach, it doesn't matter. Like, what matters is we have to communicate. And a couple minutes later in the same conversation, we're talking about the generational gap, and he's like, we can't coach this generation how we coached you guys, and coach, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, they still need to be coached. Procedures change. And so he and I in that moment came up with a quote, and I've done as much research as I can to see if anybody else has said it, and no one else has. But that quote is, change with the times, but cling to unchanging principles. And so I would say that's the biggest advice that I've gotten is, in this journey that we're on, the journey is going to have turns, curves, stops, even retreats. So you have to change with the times, but having that self-awareness, personal self-awareness and the ability to be able to step into your vulnerability allows you to be able to cling to those principles, whatever your principles are. Most of us have the same foundational principles, and then they kind of morph from there. But if you start talking about the things I talked about earlier, most people would be okay with having that as a foundation. And so sticking with those is probably where I would go.
Awesome.
It's been amazing. Are you ready for the lightning round?
Let's do it.
All right.
All right, so I'll kick us off.
Is it first thing that comes to mind, or is it an actual time limit?
There are no rules. There is no time limit either.
You got to answer really quickly.
All right, let's go. So there are no rules, but you got to answer.
But it's got to be truthful.
Gotcha.
So not like the first thing that comes to mind.
I got no. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is probably going to be the truth.
So first question. Who is the person that has had the most impact on your life?
Oh, my dad. No question about it. Go deeper into that, or just the answer?
I mean, you can expound a little bit.
I was raised by my dad. So my mom and dad split when I was 5, and I went with him, which is kind of socially against the norm, or not against the norm, but different. And so, yeah, I was raised by him. So who I am, and I like to say he showed me a real definition of masculinity, not the toxic version of masculinity that most young men and young boys get, because the men that are teaching them that don't necessarily know a real definition of masculinity. So I'm domestic. I can cook. I can clean. I know how to communicate. I love the heck out of my woman. So yeah.
Awesome.
Favorite city you've ever visited?
Oh my goodness. Coming from the guy who's been blessed to be around the world. Probably a tie between, you're going to think I'm crazy, Tel Aviv, Israel, and maybe a 3-way tie. Stockholm, Sweden, and Melbourne, Australia.
All three very different cities.
Really great places.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with anybody dead or alive, who would it be?
Man, this is tough because it's so recent, but I would probably go Kobe. I would probably go Kobe because I fought. When you and I first met a year or so ago, I was in the middle of fighting. I'm more than an athlete. Like, don't call me a basketball player. Don't just, people don't ask me, do I play basketball? They ask me who I play for. And I was so in the middle of fighting that. And again, and like we talked about before we started recording, Kobe shed such an awesome light on basketball was his platform, but it was only the platform. It was only the platform. So it would probably be Kobe. Unfortunately, after death now, but yeah, there's some people on that list.
If you can only solve one world problem, but you could solve it at the snap of your fingers, what would it be?
Cancer. Yeah, no question. I lost my dad to cancer. We've all been affected by it in some way. So, yeah.
So, last question. We'll leave on a high note. Is what's your superpower?
I heard Tyler ask you this question, and you kind of stole my answer. But I'll say connection. You said connection. But I'll say connection in a little bit different facet. So I feel like, and I've actually been told this by several different people, most recently this morning. So apparently I have an ability to put people in uncomfortable situations or take people out of their comfort zone, but not have them go through all of the emotions that when you're taken out of your comfort zone, you go through: frustration, irritation, anger, all those different things. So just this morning, I got a text message from a friend who said, like, you're a mirror. So it goes back to that authenticity piece that we're saying. I think my ability to be able to display my authenticity gives other people the okay to kind of drop their guard. And that's ultimately what I want my impact on the world to be. When I'm not here anymore, I want people to say I'm walking more in my most authentic self because I ran across Jayson and he walked in his most authentic self.
There you go. So Jayson, how can people get in touch with you? Online, social media, all that good stuff. Yeah,
online is jaysonwells.com. Just remember, it's all about the Y. So JaysonWells. Website, email is jason@jaysonwells.com. Handles are, if you type in JaysonWells, you will find something. Instagram is jason.wells. Twitter, somebody used it already, so at Twitter is Jayson Wells _, which are the two things that I'm on most. LinkedIn is my name. So yeah, I look forward to connecting big time.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show. This was fun.
Yeah, back at you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Innovation City. If you like this episode, you can find more episodes at innovationcity.co or anywhere where you watch or listen to podcasts. Please subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next week.
This is where it all begins.